Good morning and welcome to the meeting of the House Finance Committee, our first voting meeting of the year. We had the organizational meeting last week, of course, and during our organizational meeting, I wanted to introduce our Republican chair, Keith Greiner, and give him an opportunity to say hello, have a greeting, especially since he's wearing an Eagles tie. I love that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was all prepared and had this amazing speech the last time.
Oh, my goodness.
And then the chairman forgot me, and now I forget everything I was going to say, other than, I've appreciated the opportunity to work here with you the last session, and, I know we'll, obviously, like today, we're going to have some a hearing and obviously a vote coming up, and like I said, hopefully it'll be a productive year, and welcome to all the new members. And I know I have quite a few on my committee that are new. And yes, oddly enough, my mom sadly has been gone for many years, but she grew up only and my grandfather had a gas station only a few minutes for where that plane went down to Northeast Philly. So my roots, I have Philly roots too, with through my mom, despite living in Amish country. And so yes, the green is for Fly Eagles Fly, and let's hope we can beat the Chiefs this weekend. Maybe I should say we're going to beat the Chiefs, but I'll just say let's go Eagles. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair Greiner, and I appreciate the great working relationship we had the last 2 years. Looking forward to this session as well. I'd like to start, we have two meetings today, actually. We have a voting meeting at 10 o'clock, and then we have a public hearing on two bills, an informational meeting on two bills that we'll be voting in the future, and that will start about 10:15. So I'd like to take a roll call, and I'd have our Senior Committee Legislative Assistant, Lori Smith, call the roll.
Chairman Samuelson,
Here.
Abney, Sapita Freites,
Vote by designation.
Fleming,
Vote by designation.
Gallagher, Haddock, Harris,
Here. All right. Look at that.
Inglis,
Inglis.
Kajewski,
Vote by designation.
Rab,
Vote by designation.
Scott,
Vote by designation.
Vincant, Waxman, Webster, Chairman Greiner,
Here,
DeVenzo,
here by designation.
Fritz, Guidos, Jones, Kephart, Kutz,
Here by designation.
Mako,
Present by designation.
Rossi, Rinkavich,
Present by designation.
Stanbach, and Stender. You have enough for a quorum.
Thank you. All accounted for, and I know we have 9 by designation. There are several committee meetings going on at the same time, so people are trying to be in 2 or 3 places at once. So I'd like to start with the discussion. I need a motion to bring up House Bill 325. We have one bill on the agenda, sponsored by Representative Pashinsky. Do I have a motion to bring up Representative Gallagher? A second? Representative Waxman. I'd like to have our Committee Executive Director, Mark Foreman, give a summary of the bill.
House Bill 325 would clarify the gaming-funded property tax relief notice on property tax bills.
Thank you. And we also have an amendment, and for the record, Representative Cepeda Freitas is present. So I wanted to, we're going to have the amendment, but I wanted to talk briefly about the bill itself. We have this, we've had in Pennsylvania, we've had a homestead exemption on your property tax since 2008. It's been funded by the casino revenue, and it started with the legislature and Governor Rendell back when the casinos first opened in 2006. The gaming fund built up a fund balance, and then starting in 2008, the citizens got rebate on their property taxes in every school district in the state. And since then, the budget secretary, through every administration, has had to certify a number of how much is available in the property tax relief fund to fund those rebates. So they started, I think, in the neighborhood of about $200 on average statewide. It varies by school district. And over time, it has gone up. Governor Wolf raised the amount that was his budget secretary about 2002. It went up to $750 million statewide. The money technically goes from the gaming fund to the property tax relief fund and then out to the individual rebates. So in 2022, it was about $750 million. In 2024, Governor Shapiro's budget secretary, Secretary Monson, raised it to $900 million, a 20% increase. So you might have noticed in your school district that every property tax owner got about a 20% increase on their rebate. And then I heard the governor say yesterday it's going to go up to $1 billion. It's not official till April 15th, but he said in his budget speech it should be about $1 billion this year. So that would, if that comes to pass on April 15th, that would be another 11% increase. Representative Paszynski has this bill because on your property tax bill it says the homestead rebate. And a lot of times I get questions from constituents. Representative Paszynski gets questions. Hey, we're not getting anything from the casinos. But that money clearly is from the casinos, and so Representative Paszynski's bill would have a statement, you can read it on the last page of the bill, that would clearly say this is from gaming revenue, and it's from a transfer from the gaming fund. So that's the gist of the bill, to make sure our property taxpayers know that that rebate is from gaming revenues. We have an amendment sponsored by Representative Mike Jones. Do I have a motion to bring up the Jones amendment? Representative Fritz, seconded by Representative Rossi. Okay. And our senior committee executive director will give a brief description.
The amendment would add casino to the language stating that the money comes from casino gaming revenue and not just gaming revenue.
And I thank you. I'd like to call on Representative Jones, who came up with this amendment last week, and it sounds like a good one.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few comments. To the newer members, while you will likely never write a bill or offer an amendment of this magnitude, I encourage you to work hard, keep your nose to the grindstone, and maybe someday you can author a piece of legislation that at least somewhat resembles this level of legislative prowess. I thank you, Chairman. The amendment inserts the word casino. I'll be available for comment and photo ops afterward. But on a serious note, Chairman, I do appreciate you taking my suggestion. I appreciate you putting my name on the amendment. And on a somewhat serious note, I do think gaming, while a lot of us know what that means, not everybody understands the term, especially maybe some of them stereotyping a bit, but some of the seniors like my parents who aren't gamblers, and they could confuse it with lottery as well. So I think just being crystal clear that it's casino, that's the whole intent of the bill. So I appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to move the amendment.
I do like your amendment a lot. Every time I've talked to Representative Paszynski, he talks about this comes from the casinos. Between you and Representative Paszynski together, it's going to be clear on page 3 of the bill, it's from casino gaming revenue. Are there any other members who'd like to speak? Representative Greiner.
I just want to comment that I did not realize that I had a comedian on my committee. Other than that, I'm fine with the amendment as well.
So, well, we have an amendment, so you're good for the session, right, Representative Jones? No.
Maybe a little something on NOL, Chairman,
Okay.
and then I will really sing your praises. Thank you.
Are there any negative votes? Representative Cepeda Freitas.
Hi, good morning. So how would it read?
On page 3, line 13, it says this instead of uses gaming revenue to reduce your property taxes, it will say uses casino gaming revenue to reduce your property taxes. And the amendment is listed right there, but that would be the one-word amendment just to make sure it's casino gaming revenue. Any other members wish to speak? Representative Harris.
Does this include skill games? Oh, that's not casinos, right?
Nope,
Oh, okay.
not include skill games. Are there any negative votes on the amendment? The Jones amendment passes unanimously. Is there any discussion on the bill as amended from any of the committee members? Are there any negative votes on House Bill 325 as amended? House Bill 325 passes the committee unanimously and is reported to the House. So, and we're going to have a committee hearing starting in about 2 minutes. One thing I forgot to do last week at our organization meeting is ask the members to introduce yourself with your county. Let's go around and do that now, and then we'll start our hearing in 2 minutes at 10:15, starting with Representative Cepeda Freitas.
Hey, buenos dias. My name is Johanny Cepeda Freitas. I represent the 129th district, and that's in the Berks County area. To be specific, parts of Reading, all of West Reading, all of Wyomissing, all of Sinking Spring, and parts of Spring Township. Thank you.
Representative Perry Stambaugh, 86th Legislative District, which is all of Perry County, aptly named, and most of Juniata County as well.
Representative Arvin Venkat, 30th Legislative District, Allegheny County, North Hills suburbs.
Mike Jones, 93rd District in York County, which is just south of the city of York down to the Mason-Dixon line.
Representative Keith Harris, 195th Legislative District, that's Strawberry Mansion, Fairmount, and Spring Garden sections. And also, I did rub shoulders with Dwight Evans, so, but I'll take back to Representative Mike Jones, and I'll take a picture with him also. Thank you.
Ariane Abney, 19th District, City of Pittsburgh, proper, Allegheny County.
State Representative Ben Waxman, Philadelphia County.
State Representative Pat Gallagher, Philadelphia County.
State Representative John Ingalls, 38th District, that's Allegheny County, mainly the South Hills and Mon Valley.
Good morning, Joe Webster. I represent a portion of western Montgomery County.
Dallas Kephart, Clearfield and County and northern Cambria County.
Representative Leslie Rossi, Westmoreland County.
Representative Michael Stender, 108th District, which is Upper Northumberland County and all of Montour County.
Good morning, friends. Representative Jonathan Fritz, proudly representing the 111th Legislative District comprising Wayne and Susquehanna counties.
Rob Gartner, originally from Representative Venkat's district. My parents still live there, but now living in Representative Kutz's district.
I'm Representative Keith Reiner, 43rd District, which is eastern Lancaster County.
Steve Samuelson, I represent the 135th up in the Lehigh Valley. My home is in Bethlehem.
Valerie Gatos, Allegheny County, 44th District, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but we're all Eagles fans.
Good morning, Representative Thomas Coates, 87th District, Cumberland County.
And Mr. Chairman, Jim Haddock, 118th District, serving parts of Luzerne and Lackawanna County.
Thank you all. So with that, I'm going to adjourn our voting meeting at 10 o'clock and call to order our public hearing at 10:15. So for the roll call, if it's okay with the minority chair, we're going to start with the 19 people who are here right now. You're present for the hearing, and if some of the others come in, we'll announce their presence at that time. We have two bills on our public hearing, both of which, the first one of which we voted on last session. I believe it was a unanimous vote in our committee last session, and it's sponsored by Representative Jim Haddock from the the great northeast of Pennsylvania, and it is House Bill 422. And we have testimony from Representative Haddock and also Lynn Wright from the Kidney Foundation of Central Pennsylvania. The program coordinator, Lynn, was with us last summer, and we appreciate you being back here to talk about House Bill 422. Let me start with let's start with Representative Jim Haddock.
Thank you, Chair Samuelson and Chair Greiner, for bringing House Bill 422 before the committee for discussion today. House Bill 422 would provide a $12,000 tax deduction from taxable income for reimbursable expenses incurred by a living organ donor. Hopefully, no one on this committee has had a direct family member in need of a human organ transplant, but I am sure you probably know somebody who is on a current list. A human organ includes parts of a liver, pancreas, kidney, intestine, lung, or bone marrow. While the organ recipient's health insurance covers the cost of the transplantation, the donors may face other out-of-pocket expenses related to the donation, such as travel, lodging, food, lost wages for those employers that do not provide paid sick leave, and related medical expenses not covered by insurances. Sometimes those costs can be in the thousands of dollars and can be a barrier to the donation. This is particularly concerning given that more than 8,000 Pennsylvanians are on an organ donor waiting list. It is my hope that House Bill 422 will help encourage more Pennsylvanians to provide life-saving organ donations. Thank you for the consideration of my bill today, and I look forward to a productive discussion on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to call on Lynn Wright for testimony from the Central Pennsylvania Kidney Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this important legislation that ensures that financial concerns do not prevent Pennsylvanians from saving lives through organ donation. This issue is deeply personal to me, as you know. In March of 2020, 5 years ago, I donated a kidney at Johns Hopkins, and while I did not face lost wages or medical costs, I still had significant out-of-pocket expenses for travel, lodging, multiple pre-surgical evaluations, the surgery itself, and post-op follow-ups, meals and incidental costs while away from home. For many potential donors, these costs create a real and unnecessary deterrent to living donation. Beyond my personal experience as a donor, my own family has been profoundly affected by kidney disease. My husband is a kidney transplant recipient. He's seated back there. He received the gift of life in July of 2019 from my son's prom date from 7 years earlier, Victoria, Orlando. That extraordinary act of generosity changed our lives forever. But our journey with polycystic kidney disease is far from over. My sons have inherited the same disease, meaning that they too will one day face the reality of kidney failure and the urgent need for transplantation. As the program coordinator for the Kidney Foundation of Central Pennsylvania, I work with kidney patients every day. I know firsthand how many people right here in Central Pennsylvania are praying that their health holds out long enough to remain eligible for the transplant list, a list that's dreadfully long. I also know the sorrowful stories of those who never get the chance, who die before receiving this life-saving procedure. We need more living donors, but financial obstacles make it harder for willing individuals to step forward. House Bill 422 is a simple, practical step to remove a barrier that stands in the way of saving lives. A tax deduction would alleviate the personal financial burden on donors and encourage more people to consider this incredible gift. With over 90,000 Americans waiting for a kidney transplant, Pennsylvania has an opportunity to lead the way in making living donation more accessible and more possible. I urge you to support this bill and send a clear message that our state, our Commonwealth, values and supports those who choose to give the gift of life. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you. And I just wanted to, I'll open up to comments and questions from the committee members. I do want to point out on the bill, you have it in your packets, House Bill 422. On the bottom of page 1, it clearly says that you could deduct, under this legislation, you could deduct up to $12,000 of expenses related to organ donation. So with our tax rate of 3.07%, a person who would deduct $12,000 would save perhaps about $400 off of their personal income tax. So somebody This is I appreciate Representative Haddock putting this legislation forward. Somebody who's giving the gift of life should not have an undue financial burden, and a tax deduction may help in it would help that person with expenses. I do want to note for the record, the Representative Galloway, our former Representative Galloway, had a family member who went through this situation. I think they had to go, they donated an organ in California. They traveled, they had plane fare, they had hotel expenses, and that's Representative Galloway, I believe, had a version of this legislation in a previous session. Are there any committee members who have questions of Representative Haddock or of Lynn Wright? Representative Venkott.
So, first of all, I want to commend both the sponsor and the testifier on behalf of this issue. I've seen this issue from a couple different perspectives. One is I have multiple family members who are physicians who are transplant specialists, either in renal or in kidney and liver disease, and so have seen that perspective from the medical side. I've also seen it as the director of clinical ethics in my health system and the ethical issues that come up with transplantation. And I will say to the committee that last session when this bill first came up, I had some concerns because there are issues related to financial inducement for organ donation. What brought me to decide to eventually be a co-sponsor on this legislation is the point that Chair Samuelson just made, is that the amount of money that is at stake here, even at the maximalist position, is very, very small. I'm not a huge fan of slippery slope arguments, but I will say that in the future, I think we need to be careful in terms of how we craft this legislation. I think this legislation has taken that careful approach, but we want to avoid further steps that can create artificial financial inducements such that impoverished individuals feel that this is a way, as opposed to the gift of life, becomes a transactional relationship, which we want to avoid. So I'm very happy to support this legislation. I hope it comes up for a vote and moves forward. But I would just bring the perspective that we need to be cautious as we consider these types of tax policies moving forward.
Other committee members, Representative Gatos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question that falls along the lines of Representative Venkatt's questions. Are recipients allowed to reimburse donors in any amount for airfare, things like that?
Lynn
For
Wright?
nominal amounts, I imagine that, for example, I paid the young woman that was being tested for a meal in Philly when my husband got a transplant at University of Pennsylvania, but I don't think there's anybody regarded that as a transaction. They are very careful when they are evaluating the donor that their motivation is strictly to help somebody through a gift of life. It's never transactional.
Is that perhaps maybe a question Dr. Venkat can answer?
Yeah, I don't want to put myself as an expert on everything transplant, but I have not seen that in any type of significant way. Like in a social consideration, you pay for a meal for someone who happens to be going through the testing process. But generally, we have pretty strict regulations in the United States on financial remuneration related to transplant and transplant donation. Where this has come up is specifically to the issue that the tax policies and the other policies that we have don't take into account the significant personal expenses that can come up with organ donation. And so having some type of token recognition of the importance of this, I think, is a beneficial policy. I think the degrees is when this becomes a challenge.
I know Chair Greiner has a question. Any other members have a comment? And I want to correct myself. If someone would deduct if they would incur $12,000 of expenses and deduct that full amount, they would save $368 on the following year's personal income tax. Chair Greiner.
My original question was going to be, this is the same identical bill as last session, correct?
Yes.
It is.
And we had a hearing last year on this, and I believe it was the same testifier, if I'm not mistaken. So
It is.
well, that's okay. My memory's not totally going away now. I do have the last question kind of spurred me on as a CPA. I don't think there's anything wrong, though, with somebody making a gift. You know, if I want to give I don't know what that threshold is, 17,000 now. If I wanted to give a gift to an individual, I don't know how the law could preclude me from giving a gift like parents give gifts to kids and stuff like that. I think that would probably still be allowed, I would think.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, this is this bill covers actual out-of-pocket expenses by the individual. So if they were to receive a hotel room gifted to them, they would not have the receipt of actual payment. So and then again, you run into, anybody, 16 people in America will die today waiting on a transplant list. And this is as Representative Venkat said, a small, make this more awareness, heightened awareness is always a good program. But it has to be out-of-pocket expenses. So if somebody was to get a gift, that is not an out-of-pocket expense.
That's what I'm saying. I know the intent of the bill and everything. I'm just making a comment after that. But I don't think, and maybe Dr. Venkat can just say this, but if I have let's say I needed a transplant, my wife wants to give a $10,000 gift, I think, I'm just saying, I think they can do that. That's all I'm saying. I don't think that precludes it. And
Right.
I'm not saying that affects the bill in any negative way. I'm just saying I think that can be done, I would think.
Yes. I agree, gifts would be allowed up to the IRS limit, but this addresses people who put out money out of their own pocket for expenses
that's-
related to organ donation. Yeah, so.
It just spurred it on when the question came up. Thank you.
So this, my intent is to bring this bill up in late March, the next time we're together again. But if you have any further questions, please reach out to Representative Haddock or myself or Representative Griner. There'll be an amendment deadline about 24 hours before our committee meeting. I don't know the date of that, but probably the 3rd or 4th week of March. With no other questions, I'd like to move on to our second topic. Thank you, Lynn Wright, for joining us. I also like to note the presence that we have a bill by Representative Ben Waxman, which would make any amount received by Holocaust survivors as part of Holocaust reparations, make them non-taxable. Many states make them non-taxable. Pennsylvania, they're still taxable. I also want to note that we've been joined at our hearing by other representatives, Representative Kahn, Representative Solomon, and Representative Salisbury. Thank you for joining us. So Representative Waxman, I'd like you, if you could start us with talking about House Bill 416.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the members of the committee. I'm very excited to this morning have a hearing on House Bill 416, which, as the chair describes, would exempt restitution payments from the German government to Holocaust survivors from taxation. Currently, Pennsylvania is just one of only 4 states in the entire union that taxes these types of payments. These reparation payments are not subject to federal income tax, and as I mentioned, are exempt from tax in the vast majority of states. So the German government has taken commendable steps to confront its role as the perpetrator of the Holocaust and to ensure that Holocaust victims and their heirs receive restitution and compensation. There are approximately 250,000 Holocaust survivors still living across the world, with approximately 1,500 of those survivors living in Pennsylvania as of 2023. With the events of the Second World War ending 80 years ago, there are fewer and fewer survivors every year. Those who were with us were still largely children during the Holocaust. From 1945 to 2018, Germany paid $86.8 billion in restitution and compensation to Holocaust victims and their heirs. These reparations, they take numerous forms, including like the return of stolen art, art and objects to investments in healthcare and senior care, and even in some cases, direct reparations payments. So my bill, House Bill 416, is a simple amendment to the tax code that would exempt any amount received by a Holocaust survivor as part of Holocaust reparations from taxes. This legislation and the amount of money it deals with ultimately is relatively small, given the number of survivors that are still with us and here in Pennsylvania. But it means just more than that in terms of numbers. It is a way for us to honor survivors, recognize the lasting impact of the Holocaust, and ensure that survivors can keep the full measure of their rightful compensation. In my mind, it corrects what is an oversight that pretty much every other state in the union has addressed, and I hope that Pennsylvania can join them. If you look in your packets, you'll see that we have supportive testimony from the Philadelphia Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, the Holocaust Awareness Museum and Education Center, the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia, and the Pennsylvania Jewish Legislative Caucus. Do I introduce the witness or somebody else introduce you? We are lucky that today that we are joined by Rachel Howe, who is a member of 3G Philly, a group of grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, who is here to testify in favor of the legislation as well.
Thank you, and appreciate your testimony, Representative Waxman, and I call on Rachel Howe to address us on Teams.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person.
Can't hear you right now.
I think you're still muted, or you need to turn up. Oh.
We're going to work on the volume.
Oh. Hold on.
I think we made an adjustment, so let's try again.
There you go, Rachel.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Perfect.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person, but I do appreciate the opportunity to share some remarks on the changes to House Bill 416 on Holocaust reparations. I am the granddaughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, my mother's father and my father's mother. I've taught the history of the Holocaust for Philadelphia Futures, now the Heights. I volunteered for the Rob Goodwin Holocaust Museum and Education Center in South Jersey. I am a board member of 3G Philly, a group for grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, which I helped to found and was their vice president for the last 3 years. My entire life has been shaped by my grandparents' stories of survival. My grandmother waved goodbye to her mother on the train platform in Berlin. Her father had already been jailed and beaten to death by Nazis. My grandmother was escaping to live with cousins in New York. She was 16 years old, and she was excited. She had no idea she would never see her mother again, and she never forgave herself for not looking back. My grandfather fought the Nazis with the Russian army, and then from the woods with the partisan resistance movement. His mother and sister were forced to dig their own graves and shot along with his sister's young child. One of his brothers survived the war only to return to their town and with other Jews try to reclaim their house. He was killed in the pogrom that resulted. Neither of my grandparents' families were rich. My grandma Charlotte was always proud that her father had been a head waiter in a fancy restaurant in Berlin. She and her sister were sent for summers by train to their grandparents' farm in Poland, where my grandmother, annoyed by her religious grandfather's scratchy beard, once tried to cut it off. She had a boyfriend named Klutz, and she was a great swimmer, the breaststroke. My Papa Stranger's family had a small gas station and oil refinery where they also fixed bicycles. For his whole life, my grandfather's great joy was riding a bicycle. I tell you these things to humanize them. They were whole people, with friends who fought with their mothers, who loved their mother's cooking on Rosh Hashanah and Pesach, who ate pickles, who danced the tango, who went to Zionist youth clubs, who were good at algebra, who told dirty jokes in Yiddish. The war not only took their homes, not only their families, it took their whole way of life. It took their communities, their education, their language, their customs, the futures they imagined at 16 and 19, the very structures of their worlds. My mother once asked Papa what he thought the greatest invention was. He said, running water. That world, a water where people fetched water at the collective well in the town square, the Rinnick, where they might gossip or flirt or argue or pray. That world is gone. To this day, my mother wakes up panting from nightmares that dogs are chasing her, that she speaks, but no one can understand her, that she has to hide in the woods on the run. She was born in New York City, taken home on the subway, but she grew up with only one foot in America. The other was firmly planted in Istryki Dolna, Poland. She is the definition of intergenerational trauma. My mother helped my grandfather get reparations in 2001. It was an arduous process involving lawyers, paperwork, time, grief. Part of the payments were for the time my grandfather and his brothers spent doing forced labor for the German army when they first came to Istryki Dolna. That was fairly standard. But another part of the payment came from the damage when a Nazi officer hit my grandfather in the head with the butt of his rifle. The German government asked for paperwork from the Russian doctor who treated him for the wounds. This was the year 2000, and the incident happened during the war. At that time, Papa was getting his drinking water from puddles, a long time to keep discharge paperwork. Not to mention that after the war, he ran from the Soviet side to the west and tore up any papers he had at that time for his own safety. Reviewing these claims with the German government was time-consuming. Preparing to come here today, I asked my mother why it was so important for her to push through. She said that apologies are nice, but this was an act of taking responsibility that was more than words. It symbolized to the world that the Germans accepted responsibility and were regretful for what happened, for killing people and taking from us generations, for the scars, mental and physical, that my grandparents carried for the rest of their lives. I urge you not to tax these small payments. For her mother's death and for her own pain and suffering, my grandma Charlotte got about $20,000 in the 1960s, taken in small payments over decades, about $200 per month. She worked hard all her life in America, first in a lampshade factory and later in a bakery. She learned to speak English by reading the funny papers. After serving in the South Pacific, her husband worked decades for the post office and always had a second job. They had a one-bedroom walk-up in the Bronx. My aunt recalls doing her homework in the bathroom on the hamper to get privacy. The reparations gave them the smallest of additional cushions for a movie, a nice coat. Taxing this relatively small amount feels cruel and punitive. How much was her mother's life worth? Not to mention her father's, her half-sisters, her nephews, just toddlers, her grandparents. How much is your mother's life worth? If you got $20,000 for it, should we tax it? In 2001, upon the passage of a similar federal bill signed by then President George W. Bush, the bill's sponsor, Senator Peter Fitzgerald, told the Washington Post, it would be beneath the dignity of the United States government to assess federal income tax on the modest restitution payments that the few Holocaust survivors who are still living would receive. If someone steals money from you and you get it back, you don't pay income tax on it. I urge you to consider that it is beneath the dignity of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as well, beneath the dignity of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as well, a state I am proud to call my home, with deep Quaker roots steeped in religious tolerance and peaceful practices. These taxes would add relatively little to our state coffers, yet they will take so much from the survivors and their families whose only sense of redress and justice are these checks. Thank you for taking the time to consider my words today. Many people don't trust government anymore, but I do. I trust the good men and women of this Commonwealth to make the right decision. I wish you all peace.
Thank you, Rachel Howe, for that moving testimony. And I believe the committee members agree that we should not be taxing reparations from the Holocaust. I appreciate Representative Waxman's leadership for pointing out that we are one of only 4 states and we should take action to address that. I have one question, then I'll open it up to other committee members. Do we know approximately how many residents of Pennsylvania, you said there are 1,500 Holocaust survivors in Pennsylvania. Do we know how many survivors or survivors' descendants are receiving reparations from the German government at the present time?
So I think we're still working to identify that number. I know that that is obviously an important figure to have from revenue, and I know that our executive director and I are working on that. As I said, there are just 1,500 survivors left in Pennsylvania. It is not every survivor that is receiving restitution. It's certainly not, I don't even, we don't even believe necessarily the majority. So we're going to get that number zeroed in from revenue and make sure that we have it. Whatever that number is going to be, it's not going to be a big one. So.
And I agree wholeheartedly that we should not be taxing those reparations that are paid to Holocaust survivors and, in some cases, their descendants. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee members? I'd also like to note for the record that Representative Krajewski and Representative Scott, members of the Finance Committee, are present for our hearing. We have a comment from Representative Chair Greiner.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, by the way, I really appreciate the testimony online, too. I think that just from an ethics, it's just wrong. It's hard to leave. I mean, I appreciate you, articulating that there's only 4 states that still do this. And I think this should have been done a while ago, probably, in my opinion. Is this the first time this bill's ever been introduced, or?
Yeah, as far as we can tell, yes. And I actually have to make sure that I shout out Philadelphia Delegation Chairwoman Morgan Cephas, who actually is the person who brought this to my attention in the first place and said, hey, are you aware? Because she had a meeting where someone brought it up with her. And she approached me and said, you should look at this, and we did, and obviously it's something that needs to be addressed. But as far as we know, this has not been introduced before, which is surprising to me as well.
I just think it's a meaningful bill. I think we don't have a lot of survivors left. The dollar amount probably, we spend money in other crazy ways, and I'm just saying I think this is just the right thing to do, and I appreciate you bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thank you, Chair Greiner. With no other comments from committee members, I would also like to say I think this is the right thing to do. I intend to bring this up our first meeting when we're back at the end of March. There'll obviously amendment deadline 24 hours in advance. But thank you, Representative Waxman, for introducing this legislation. Thank you, Rachel Howe, for your testimony. With no other business before the committee, I will adjourn this hearing.
Thank you.